My mom. Huh, um, so I never thought of my mom as a daughter, but as I'm doing, I did father-daughter project after I wrote the book. I said I should interview my mom and start talking to her about her. I didn't totally interview from the questions, but I started asking her questions about. And I never realized this. My mom had been married 3 times. She died last year, but she'd been married 3 times. I had a tough relationship with her. She was really abusive towards me. And then I suddenly had this moment, this religious moment where I sat in my room really pissed at my mom and I realized, this is not about me. She's not mad. She's just she's a mess emotionally. And I just happened to be there. And so she's taking it out on me. And I realized, no, she's having a hard life. And my dad was really her first husband was really tough on her.
Mm.
Tough on her. I didn't realize her dad was the one that started it all. Okay, her dad came from Europe, from Romania, and he married someone who was related to a world famous family in Canada, originally from Canada, who was I forget his name, but he's an author, famous author. Tons of movies that are written because of this author.
Mm-hmm.
And it was her. She was related to him, and they had a big trucking company, so they were wealthy and all that stuff. She wasn't wealthy, but so when they married, she was like in the new world, from the new world, and he was from the old world. Okay, the old country. And so he had a restaurant or a club, and he expected her to work in a club, and she's like used to not. I don't do that. I read literature. I mean, she's a totally different generation. Basically, she loved him deeply. My mom's father, but my grandfather, but it didn't work. It just didn't connect culturally, and so she left him with 4 kids. Okay, and she would interact periodically with the kids, but she was like torn because she loved him and then knew she couldn't connect at the same time. Okay, I'm not letting her off or not, whatever. I'm just saying that's what happened. Okay, so my grandfather had this pain that inside him that he didn't know how to deal with, so he took it out on my mom.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked at yourself in the mirror? Nobody's ever going to want to be your wife, your husband. He would torture her with things like this. She would try hard to be the mommy in the family, wash the clothes and take care of things and stuff like that. It was never enough. And she would be tortured by her dad, and just, I'm not getting him off the hook on this, but that's what he was. And she said she became a CPA. He said, nobody's ever going to want you as a client, to be your client. I mean, don't you understand it? Don't you understand how bad you are? I mean, he would torture her. And as I was talking to her, that she started exposing it. And I went, wait, as a child, I remember little things like that he would pick on her. And it was like no reason. And it wasn't because he didn't love her. It was because he was so overwhelmed with emotion and didn't know how to deal with his emotion that he took it out on his kids, which is common, sadly. Okay. Yeah. So then she got the first husband. And he was like the same. I mean, he was tough and successful in business and everything else, but he would torture her all the time. He would just really, he wouldn't, never physically, but mentally, emotionally. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Eventually divorced him after she tried to commit suicide. She divorced him. And then she eventually married someone in Chicago who was a successful businessman, all that stuff. And he was also very tough on her. Eventually she divorced him. So I called my mom and I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And she's living in Southern California. And she said, "Oh yeah, I'm teaching Norman, the guy downstairs from me. She had a condo in Southern California. So I'm teaching Norman, the guy who lives downstairs from me, how to dance. Because if nobody teaches him how to dance, the guy's going to die of loneliness." I said, "Well, why?" Well, his wife died of cancer about a year ago, and yeah, he's just not a social person. I said, "So what's he like?" "Oh, he's the nicest person. You wouldn't believe it." I said, "What does he look like?" "Oh, he's so cute." I said, "So how come you don't date him?" Oh, without a hesitation, he said, "Because he's too." I have to remember the word. She's basically saying because he's too nice.
That is so powerful. How those patterns that we carry with ourselves, like this, you're telling the generational trauma story, and that's what strikes me in so many of these conversations, and how important looking in the mirror is and trying to understand where we came from. And it's a really hard thing to do.
Well, the good news is within 6 months, They married.
Oh,
Okay. And it changed her life. I saw my mom said, you know, she would be holding hands with him. I never saw my mom holding hands with a husband. You know, she would be sitting. He eventually died after just over about 20 years, and we were at the hospital while, you know, in his last days. And I saw her sitting next to him, holding hands, and they were crying and everything. And it was like she finally had somebody that connected with him. He's too nice. He was too nice to her. She wasn't. He would defend me. She says, Norman defends me. You know. I mean, sometimes he would sit back as my kids would attack. They, you know, my kids have a lot of my mom's genes. You know.
yes.
You know, you stop treating Norman like that. You're being mean to Norman. Oh, he's okay. You don't tell me how to treat my husband. Yo, mom, you're treating Norman badly. You know, and they would, and Norman would sit there, like all of us would sit back and a big smile on their face as they watched it. You know.
Yeah.
But I mean, but you can see that my mom was like a kid. I mean, she was like a teenager with her first love when she finally had it. But it made me realize it was just a fraction away from her rejecting this guy who was the perfect one for her. And because it was programmed into her from her dad that, you know, if I'm not comfortable with somebody who's, you know, not being abusive towards me. And it made me realize like how profound it was and that it can change. This is not, you know, it's not in lead or in stone that this can't be changed. It can be changed, but it does take help and support.
Yeah. And that's part of what we're doing here. And people telling these kind of stories, because it really reduces the shame that comes along with them. I always say everyone's doing the best they can with what they know. And then add to that, it's our responsibility to learn more. And when we learn more, you know, we can be better, and for ourselves and for the people around us. And it's profound to see the effect that can have, but it really is baby steps, right? At each, and these questions that you ask and that curiosity that you had to start the Father-Daughter Project. I mean, these things turn into amazing things that help a lot of people.